So this is an interesting one. We're getting asked more and more about the relationship between self-reg and inclusive schooling, and things like IEPs, and this one in particular is about functional behavior analysis. Sometimes we get asked about different programs and so on and supports that are looking at managing behavior and looking for the interconnection or the relationship where it's the same and where it's different. And so this one is one we're going to be doing a lot on. I'm going to be doing a lot on with my background in this area pre-TMC. But the question was, or the assumption is, that self-reg is just another way of doing FBA. So it's less systematic and objective.
So can I give you finally a 1-minute answer?
Yes.
Self-reg is dyadic. Self-reg is triadic. Self-reg is enadic. Self-reg understands that our starting point for doing, quote, behavior analysis is what we're really looking at is inter-brain connections. And if you remove the right-hand side of the equation, you are at best, not at best, you will not understand what's going on.
I think that's a terrific, although if you're like me, you're now going to Google to look up enadic. He does that to me fairly regularly.
That means polyadic.
Well, it was a good guess, but so I mean, that's why I love working with Stuart. I do a lot of Google searching, let's just put it that way. I think for me to build on that as well. So that's really key. It's not about within individuals. It's in with relationships and contexts, and that whole ecological lens is a big piece of it. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll add is that I love that we're working with lots of folks whose field of expertise is this in some way, and they're coming together and they're trying to figure out how they can do what they've been doing, do it a little bit differently, maybe recognizing some of the things they were already doing that fit from a self-reg lens and some of the gaps, and I find that very hopeful. To me, self-reg is not instead of FBAs, it goes deeper. And there's a whole bunch of different approaches to FBAs out there. But I mean, it's basically looking at, a child's, let's say a child is avoiding behavior. So it's got an avoiding behavior. And so you've recognized that, and then that's part of what's going on. And you've taken the data and you've recognized that. For us, that is an important thing to recognize, and it's legit, and you do notice it. Why and why now? And we don't stop the detective work. If something that we try is doesn't working, that's just more cool information to recognize this isn't working. We don't look at just that individual ever. It's always within the context, the bigger picture, the bigger understandings. But mostly I find it's actually a tool, like Stuart often will say when people ask him about various things, well, what do you think about this? Or I'm trying this self-control approach to this program or whatever. And he just asks very genuinely, well, how's that working for you? And 9 times out of 10, people will kind of laugh, or they'll tell you that it's not. And so I think that's what we need to look at. I always like the idea, if you're trying something and it works and you've actually changed the trajectory, or you've worked on whatever it is you want to work on, that's terrific. I think you got to the root of it and you've learned something. If it doesn't, then that's where I think self-reg is really a gift, because it allows you to think about how to go deeper and understand more, so that then you can figure out, stress, energy, and tension beneath it, and where to from there.
I'm tempted to give you another case example.
You do it.
Well,
You said 1 minute.
I got an email this week,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting email. It was from a school principal. And she asked me, she didn't understand this, nor do I, by the way. So it was a kid who was having a lot of problems at home and doing really well at school. So they've been working on it, and now what's happened is the kid is doing really well at school and really badly at home. So there's this something going on in the child, right, that I suddenly realized, well, if I was to do some sort of an FBA, whatever we call it, in the home, and do another one in the school, and then we get totally, and now I'm going to add in another complexity. So she then told me, so anyways, I'm puzzling about this because it's puzzling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to be puzzled. So then she shares with me, as I responded, she shares, the really weird thing is he was doing great. And then a couple of new kids came into the school, into the class. And it's like total reversion, total shift. And so I'm thinking, well, so not only do I have the environment to look at, but now what was going on in this particular case was, and this is an important part of self-reg. In self-reg, we learn how to reframe behaviors. And this is, and if you think about doing a straightforward behavior analysis, that you've got your constructs are sort of there on your sheet, and you're filling it in, oppositional or whatever. But in self-reg, what we're doing is we are reframing concepts that we take for granted. So this is a very interesting case, this guy, because they thought that he was reverting to heightened distractibility. Mm-hmm. In fact, what was going on was he was in a state of hypervigilance. The new kids represented a threat. And it's hard to say why. Could have just been because they were new. But the point is that in heightened threat vigilance, what goes on is the child becomes hyper vigilant, attuned to all kinds of subtle cues. And it may look to you like distractibility, but in fact, it's something very different. It's a limbic system that has now been triggered, etc. And so one of my problems with, one of the reasons why we're constantly asking why and why now is not simply, why is he suddenly oppositional, or whatever your concept. Mm-hmm. But also we go a step deeper now, and we're going to ask ourselves, what is this? When we ask why, is this actually what I am assuming? So we get very worried about implicit built-in biases that prevent us from going deeper into the behaviors that we are seeing. I don't know if I explained that well.
You really are. And I think that goes back again to these relationships, and even the recognizing that it's not within individuals, it's within context, and we're part of that, trying to figure that out, valuing whose knowledge we consider, we kind of privilege the experts. Sometimes, a lot of times, this will be an outsider coming in and trying to observe, and you'll see things differently than an inside.
What I want self-reggers to do is, especially someone who's coming into the field that has a background in the kind of thing like doing an FBA, what I want them to be doing is asking themselves, what am I actually observing here? Because they have assumptions built in to, and so, so let's say you tick off, heightened oppositional behavior. Yeah. But in fact, what it really is it's not oppositional behavior, it's fight or flight.
It's defensive.
It's defensive, exactly. And then you can start to ask why. And so what I find, to be honest now, what I really feel about this is that self-reg represents a quantum leap in the depth that we bring to these issues, where we are constantly trying to go deeper and deeper on the basis of the stuff you and I cover in Foundations, of what actually we are observing. And it's incredible how distorted that is by old paradigms.
And misunderstandings of what it is.
Misunderstandings of what it is.
I would say we're more systematic, or we're equally as systematic, just in a different way. Ours is reflective in its deep questioning and constantly trying to go deeper and understand.
And we rely on a science that the other does not, because this is new.
And we look at it's how we frame and look at what's going on. It's always communication. If we haven't figured it out, it means there's more to figure out.
Okay, so
going deeper.
So bottom line, I read something this week that just blew me away. Do you ever read Quora?
Yes, I think so.
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
So they had, it was in Quora this week, and it was a psychotherapist in Belgrade. And she wrote the most, I'm going to send it to you. She wrote the most wonderful description of how she sees psychotherapy. I think her name was Milovich or something like that. And what she said is when a client comes in, the first thing they do is they take off their hat and coat and gloves. And then through the process of psychotherapy, they start to take off their defense mechanisms. And she says at the end of this process, which is why I read it, at the end of this process, what you see is this beautiful human being. Yeah, that just made me nuts when I read it. And I thought another problem that I have with any kind of a behavior analysis is that we jump to categorizing. And we categorize in a way that fails to recognize that every single kid is this beautiful human being.
Absolutely. So there we go. Beautiful human beings. And they do work together, but I really, if you're trying to figure this quandary out, look at self-reg as not an alternative. It's not something just philosophical. There is actually a systematic approach, and it goes deeper and will answer some of those unanswerable questions that you may be struggling with. And so we wish you much luck with that.